Greetings and salutations. It's Fatal Pros here with another live reading. We are still in Salvation, Black People in Love by Bell Hooks. Today I'll be reading for you Chapter 6, Mama Love. As always, this is a live reading, and so, I will do my best to, get the content delivered to you. But if you have questions, please leave them in the comments. And I'll be more than happy to, react to those and try to answer any initial questions that come up. But the focus is the reading itself. So I'll go ahead and get started. And again, thank you so much for listening. This is Mama Love. An overwhelming majority of Black folks will testify that they were first loved by a Black woman. In African American life, Black women have been love's practitioners. Amazingly, despite how easy it would have been or would be for Black women to give up on love, given the adversity we have had to confront on these shores, many of us have held to our hope in love because we believe in love's power to heal and renew, to reconcile and transform. Good morning, Chrissy. It has not been easy for Black women to maintain faith and love in a society that has systemically devalued our bodies and our beings. When we look back at the history of Black women, from slavery to the present day, we see ourselves represented first and foremost as inferior beasts of burden, compelled by circumstances to serve the needs of others. In Darkwater, Voices from Within the Veil, published in 1920, W.E.B. Du Bois published the essay Damnation of Women as an homage to enslaved Black women and their daughters. He writes, "The crushing weight of slavery fell on Black women. Under it, there was no legal marriage, no legal family, no legal control over children. Out of this, what sort of Black women can be born into the world of today? There are those who hasten to answer this query in scathing terms and who say lightly and repeatedly that out of Black slavery came nothing decent in womanhood, that adultery and uncleanliness were their heritage and are their continued portion." Du Bois wrote this essay to defend Black women. While he praised Black female leaders from slavery on, he urged that Black people support the uplifting of women by challenging sexism and gender discrimination, but his advice was not heeded. Rape of Black women during slavery distinguished our experience from that of Black men, whose harsh lot of workers was shared. Violated Black females had to cope with the disgust and disdain of everyone around them. No one cared about the impact of traumatic rape on their psyches. Enslaved Black women were caught in a paradoxical situation. When they coped with the rape at the hands of white and Black men with grace, they were seen by their oppressors as superhuman, animalistic, and monstrous, capable of enduring atrocities that would break the spirits of real women. As Black women testified in slave narratives, even other Black people held them responsible for circumstances over which they had no control. No one praised Black women's generosity of heart, their willingness to practice forgiveness. Often enslaved Black women found strength to love through religious belief. Sojourner Truth felt that she had been called to become an anti-racist activist. Her vision and courage were rooted in a sense of divine calling. As with many Black women who preceded her, prayer was the connection between her and divine spirit. Prayer, along with religious beliefs, allowed enslaved Black females to develop an oppositional spirit where they were able to resist seeing themselves through the eyes of their oppressors. They saw themselves as God's children with the right to freedom and justice. In the narrative of Sojourner Truth, edited by Margaret Washington, she is described as utterly devoted to the will of divine spirit. No doubt, no hesitation, no despondency spreads a cloud over her soul, but all is bright, clear, positive, and at times ecstatic. Her trust is in God, and from Him, she looks for good and not evil. She feels the perfect love casteth out fear. Loving God not only helped Black women survive, sacred teachings about love provided a metaphysics that guided and shaped human interaction. Just as some enslaved black women survived by opening their hearts and trusting in divine will, other black women survived by hardening their hearts and by shutting down their emotions. Like contemporary trauma victims who disassociate as a means of enduring and surviving brutal assaults, some enslaved black women just cut off feelings. In Trauma and Recovery, Judith Herman highlights the aftermath of violence on the psyche, emphasizing the toll on victims. Traumatized people feel utterly abandoned, utterly alone, cast out of the human and divine systems of care and protection that sustain life. Thereafter, a sense of alienation, of disconnection, pervades every relationship, from the most intimate familial bonds to the most abstract affiliations of community and religion. When trust is lost, traumatized people feel that they belong more to the dead than to the living. Ooh. Once slavery was abolished, there were no scholars ready to interview the slaves about post-traumatic stress disorder. Few documents recorded anything about the emotional well-being of the newly freed slave. All the emphasis was on material survival. You're welcome, Black Pepper. During slavery, enslaved black people never behaved as though material comforts were all that mattered in life. Historical material documents how hard folks worked to establish Historical material documents how hard folks work to establish and maintain emotional another. The desire to respect ties between biological family members was so intense that newly freed slaves often spent lifetimes searching for their kin. Enslaved Africans made beautiful art, created music that still dazzles the world, and sought to find spaces, however relative, of self-actualization and self-development despite bondage. Religion became the location where creativity of mind and heart could freely be given expression. In worship, the slaves could know joy and delight, could know experientially that they were more than their pain. The incredible resiliency of spirit enslaved black people possessed has often deflected attention away from the legacy of psychological woundedness the experiences of enslavement generated. In the past, black leaders were so eager to insist that black folks had triumphed over the evils of slavery and the brutality of racial apartheid that there was little cultural space to talk psychoanalytically about post-traumatic stress and negative scars on the psyche. While historical documents provide evidence proving that newly freed slaves often set up households based on the same principles of coercive domination that they had experienced, these facts have not led to enough discussion about the black experience of trauma and recovery. Thank you for the roses. It has taken almost a century for people to feel free to talk about a continuum of psychological woundedness that still impacts our collective mental health in black life. This reality is nowhere more evident than in the lives of African American women, as it was during slavery that we were first represented as licentious, lustful, untrustworthy betrayers. These racist and sexist stereotypes were first articulated by powerful white men eager to explain away their use and abuse of the black female body they claimed to hate so much. In a world rooted in patriarchal religious teachings, it was much shrewder for all white folks to blame black women for abuse by claiming they were monstrous sexual temptresses who lured good, upright white men into sin. By accepting this scenario, white women did not have to acknowledge their connections to white male terrorists and rapists. Since sexual slavery, i.e., women bound to men in conditions of lifelong servitude and subordination, continued even as slavery based on race ended, black women still had to face a culture that perceived and still perceives us as the embodiment of these stereotypes. To make matters worse, black men and pious black women often internalize many sexist, racist ways of seeing black females. All these factors together sustain a psychological climate that is conducive to the formation of self-hate rather than self-love. Powerful. Living in a culture that constantly devalues us, black women must work doubly hard to be loving. Coping with the stigma of being labeled whores and prostitutes, licentious and lewd, led black women in the early 20th century to place undue emphasis on puritanical virtue. Believing that claiming the status of virtuous womanhood would automatically dispel negative stereotypes, black females often surrendered emotional playfulness and sensuality in favor of a stern maternal stance. This created the same tense divisions between black women that variations in their color created, for all black women were subject to being seen as either Madonnas or whores. Both representations required that black females surrender a complex emotional universe and conform to a stereotype. Since a hatred of the black female body and its natural functions was at the root of both stereotypes, no matter the identity of a black female embrace, Madonna or whore, it was unlikely she would learn to love her physicality. Man, let's get into it. One of the most important contributions that came from a fusion of the 60s black power struggle, sexual liberation, and feminist movement was the emphasis on accepting and loving the body. Ideas from these three movements helped release black women and all women from the tyranny of patriarchal woman hating, leaking the notion that black is beautiful with a vision of female entitlement to sexual pleasure meant that all black women no longer had to fear being judged as without virtue if we were sexual. Black female self-love could be fully realized only when individuals no longer internalize negative stereotypes. Black women who had carried a burden of shame in the mid-1900s and after because they had babies without being married or had to marry because they were pregnant no longer had to suffer disdainful attacks from all sides. The attacks continued, but the way an individual woman coped with being attacked was changed forever. That was peace. New and better birth control also enabled more black women to enter the 70s asserting positive sexual agency, including ensuring that we were not the victims of unwanted pregnancy. Come on now. Unlike many of my white female college mates and peers, I and other black women I knew did not use abortion as a means of birth control. We were obsessed with using appropriate contraception so that we would not need abortions. At this time, Shirley Chisholm was among the first feminist women to speak out against unwanted pregnancy. She urged black people to support contraception and abortion when needed. With amazing courage, she called attention to the large numbers of black women who lost their lives seeking unsafe abortions. All right now. Chisholm's work was never given the attention it rightfully deserved, largely because she uncovered data that countered racist and sexist stereotypes, which suggested that poor black women, and for that matter, black females of all classes, were eager to give birth so they could receive welfare. Her work and that of other feminist women showed that most mature women, when given options, did not want to bring an unwanted pregnancy to term. Patriarchal male leaders in the black church, with the help of puritanical punishing matriarchs, intervened on progressive reproductive rights efforts by encouraging black females to believe they would be punished by God if they had abortions. Conservatives, black and white, denounce welfare even though they made and make it difficult for poor black females to receive needed sex education and necessary abortions. If all black communities took a more progressive stance on sexuality and reproductive rights, then there would be fewer unwanted pregnancies. Why? This book was written 20 years ago. Why? Okay, let's go. Despite changes in the ways the larger culture thinks about sexuality, many young black females still risk pregnancy because they are responding to the desires of males, usually older, who want not only to be sexual with them, but to do so without using condoms or other birth control devices. To not put herself at risk, a young female has to possess healthy self-esteem that makes it possible for her to not only say no, but to engage as well in the preventative health care that keeps her from placing herself in any situation where she might be in jeopardy. There is little work done on the prevalence of date rape in black communities. Yet daily young females are coerced sexually by men. Of course, when coercion is taking place, there is no use of a contraceptive device. Revealing tell-all accounts of his own and other black males' rapes of unsuspecting females in the memoir, Makes Me Want to Holler, A Young Black Man in America, Nathan McCall tells how his teenage son asked him, "Is it all right to take it from a girl if you take her out and she won't give it up?" The fact that black females are perceived as a group that men can rape without consequence is part of the continuum of devaluing black female bodies that began during slavery. Man. Charlotte Pierce Baker. Charlotte Pierce Baker has edited a groundbreaking collection of black women's stories of rape, Surviving the Silence, which reminds readers of the extent to which this society has never taken the rape of black women seriously. Knowing this, black females who are raped often say nothing and live with the troubling psychic aftermath of this trauma. Man, okay. Nothing is more heartbreaking in these stories than the lack of support for their recovery. Time and time again, a black female elder blames the victim or demands silence to protect the perpetrator. These were the lessons many black folks learned in the context of slavery. Protect evil rather than correct it. Some black women learned these lessons as well and turned their backs on female victims of male brutality. My God. Developing positive self-esteem about our bodies and beings continues to be arduous for black females in a society that consistently represents us negatively. Promoting devaluation and hatred of black females has been absolutely politically strategic within white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. As long as folks hate and fear black women, seeing us as sluts and prostitutes, there is little chance that masses of white men will ever choose to marry black women. As long as black females are hated and despised, the purity of white families remains intact. Ironically, while contemporary movies like The Bodyguard, Rich Man's Wife, and Bulworth exploit the taboo by portraying love relationships between black women and white men, in the end, these bondings are always disastrous. The black female is stereotypically represented as overly sexual, desire only for her body. And in one film, where the black female is married to the rich white male, she is portrayed as an ex-drug addict, user, hoe, betrayer. White supremacist thinking keeps these racist, sexist stereotypes alive in everyone's imagination for a reason. It both encourages and allows for white male lust for black females, even as it encourages this lust to stay on the level of objectification and degradation. IDK WTF says, this why we are still having our fight today about not giving it up. Facts. Oh, God. Okay. Often, when black women are romantically approached by white men in real life, the black female does not responsibly because she fears that he may project racist, sexist fantasies onto her. No one talks about white men loving black women. Such unions are always represented as being always and only about sexual lust. This will not change until more anti-racist people, especially white males, share their love stories and offer a different picture. Says absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Images of black women in movies by black filmmakers, mostly males, have done little to change racist, sexist stereotypes. Spike Lee, John Singleton, and a host of other black male artists continue to project sexist images of black womanhood. In their films, when the black female is not a sex object, she is often depicted as a treacherous, evil, I'm not going to say that word. Since most black males share with white males patriarchal thinking that already depicts females as innately evil and lustful, they have not offered the world alternative ways to think about black women. Instead, way too many sexist black males have exploited black females with the same indifference and lack of connection that characterized white male use and abuse of black females during slavery. Oh, gosh. Okay. Since these men, like their white counterparts, see females as subordinates, they see nothing wrong with their attitudes. The most troubling aspect of Nathan McCowell's confessions of his abuse and rape of black females is the lack of critical interrogation of his motives and the failure to indicate how his attitudes changed. When his son wants to know if it's acceptable to date rape, he can only tell him to imagine the guy wanting to do the same thing to his mother. McCowell never shows that he has unlearned sexist thinking. It is difficult to imagine that had he been callously describing the senseless rape and violation of white females without ever showing deep critical reflection or remorse, his book would be a bestseller. Given racism and sexism, his use and abuse of black women is merely the colorful black backdrop that gives him street credentials and makes him more interesting. He never talks about learning the meaning of love or of loving black females. His story is not uncommon. Cultural critic, activist, and writer Kevin Powell is one young black male who has outspokenly criticized sexism and violence against women. Significantly, he began his public discussion of women hating by offering personal confessions. In the autobiographical work Keeping It Real, post-MTV Reflections on Race, Sex, Politics, Powell scrutinizes his relationship with all the women in his life. His journey, always honest and often painful, begins with the tumultuous but pivotal relationship with his mother. It was that relationship, filled with love, resentment, anger, and fear, that Powell sought to recreate or, at other times, obliterate in his intimate relationships with women later in life. Cassia says, yep, Kevin Samuels never spoke of love or how to live. That's facts. Until black females are no longer collectively perceived always and only through racist and sexist stereotypes, cultivating self-love will remain a difficult, though by no means impossible, task. Throwing off the burden placed on us by sexism and racism is one of the ways that we love ourselves and other black women. All loving black females threaten the status quo. Ooh, okay. Clearly, the most troubled black females are those who try to find a place for themselves within the existing paradigms by internalizing self-hatred. When any black female acts out in a manner that is in keeping with negative stereotypes, there is more room for her in the existing social structure than there is for decolonized black women who challenge the status quo. No doubt, this is why so many young black women feel that the only options that they have are to claim the roles of a B and a hoe. Okay. By embracing these labels, they can feel a false sense of agency. They fit within the dominant culture's idea of them. Okay. Like their enslaved counterparts, these black females find the strength to survive through processes of disconnection and disassociation. They feel that being emotionally open and vulnerable, which we must all be if we are to love and be loved, only means that they will be wounded or worse, crushed. Better not to have a heart than to have one that is constantly breaking. When I first began to teach women's studies courses focusing on black women, students often describe their perceptions of adult black women using words like stern, strong, and hard. Again and again, I would hear students of all colors describe black women they saw on the streets as unsmiling and rigid. When we would later examine the details of black women's lives, facts that document the reality that many of us lived in poverty or low-paying jobs without access to health care, that we are likely to be single for much of our adult life, that of the 3 leading causes of death for women, heart disease, breast cancer, and lung cancer, we are disproportionately at risk and most likely to die if we have these illnesses, and that we are daily the victims of unacknowledged verbal and physical assault, both in the streets and in our homes. They understood the reasons black females do not appear open and playful. After examining these facts, students will often say, what do black women have to smile about? Disaster Girl Man says, there are still large groups of people that call reading this book victim mentality. Facts. Untrue, but it's facts. Since adversity has been so unrelenting in black women's lives, a great many black females are losing faith. When I meet with young black girls who are already deeply cynical about their fate in this society, I am reminded of the reality that hatred of black womanhood is ever present in this culture and gathering added momentum. The young feel its painful assaults before they have established a sense of self strong enough to ward off this threat. Again and again, I am reminded of the fact that as racial integration removed barriers that once forbade contact and connection, invisible, unspoken barriers were put up in their place. In my adult life, I rarely hear a white person express his contempt and disdain for black womanhood, but I see it in the images white people create. I see it in the way young white women treat black women. They have hired as nannies. At times, their interactions is like a scene from the antebellum South. No wonder, then, that black girls can sit and tell me that no one sees them as desirable, especially if they have dark skin. Girls growing up in segregated black communities and schools did not doubt their value as profoundly as girls did in integrated environments. In segregated spaces, black people controlled representations, yet we did project images of ourselves that were constantly self-hating and ugly. For black girls to have a chance to build healthy self-esteem in an integrated colonizing environment, there must be oppositional strategies and places that promote decolonization. Weary adult black women often abandon the emotional care of young females. In the face of unchanged races and sexist stereotypes, older black women often harden their hearts so as to not feel the pain. Numb emotionally, they are often aggressively judgmental and punishing in their attitudes towards younger females. Any black woman who reads contemporary fiction by African American women finds their narrative after narrative of mothers emotionally shaming and wounding their daughters. As a girl, I was always disturbed when hearing the old saying, black women raise their daughters and love their sons. Ouch. It suggested not only that girls did not matter, but that the only role our mothers played in relationship to us was to keep us in check, to discipline and punish us, or teach us how to conform to a woman's lot, showing us how to be subordinate and servile. Often, when a young black female has been hurt, attacked, raped, or incested, she is blamed by stern black matriarchs. I have witnessed daughters telling their mothers about sexual abuse. These mothers respond with harsh, interrogating questions, denying the truth of their daughter's words rather than giving sympathy or offering therapeutic care. These acts of unlove are what lead so many black females to harden their hearts as they strive to make the transition from being teenagers to young adulthood. They lose faith. This loss can be as detrimental to the psyche as addictions. Confirming this in her book, Stop Being Mean to Yourself, Melody Beatty contends there are many drugs that can injure the body and deaden the soul. Cocaine, alcohol, heroin, marijuana, but there are other drugs whose narcotic power we overlook. Disillusionment and betrayal can grind away at our souls until all our faith and hope are gone. The cumulative effect of a lifetime of disappointments can lead us wandering around confused, lost, and dull. Whether it happens in one moment or over many years, losing faith deadens the spirit. Popular racist and sexist myths that depict black women as strong matriarchs, able to endure any and all blows to the spirit, keep everyone from acknowledging black female heartache and woundedness. To avoid pain, black females often turn to substance abuse or to psychic self-mutilation by disconnecting and closing the door to their hearts. Cassie says, this is our perception of life. They don't see this as empathy, compassion, open to change. Man. Mystique says, what nonsense are you talking about? Nobody believes what you're talking about. Okay. Mystique, stick around. We're going to keep reading. Women who harden their hearts, who turn away from love, are unforgiving in their relationships with other females. This is as true of black women as it is of any group of women in this racist society. In my book about writing, Remembered Rapture, I included an essay discussing the fact that black women who write about my work have done so with a level of mean-spirited hatefulness that is awesomely intense. Audre Lorde was one of the first black female feminist thinkers to call attention to the rage and hostility black women unleash on one another. In her insightful essay, Eye to Eye, Lorde wrote, "Why do black women reserve a particular voice of fury and disappointment for each other? Who is it we must destroy when we attack each other with that tone of predetermined and correct annihilation? This cruelty between us, this harshness, is a piece of the legacy of hate with which we were inoculated. Ironically, when a black woman reaches out with tenderness and care, other black females may see her as not tough enough, as not a real black woman, a projection that once again denies us our full humanity." Lorde was clear about the fact that many black women had to unlearn their own sexist woman-hating to love themselves and other black women. She confesses, until now, there has been little that taught us how to be kind to each other. To the rest of the world, yes, but not to ourselves. There have been few external examples of how to treat another black woman with kindness. Um, there have been few external examples of how to treat another black woman with kindness, deference, tenderness, or an appreciative smile. When I first read this essay, it seemed alien to my experience, and I was struck by the fact that Lord was writing from her experience growing up in the urban North, the child of West Indian parents. In the Southern world of my upbringing, much of the sweetness of life came from the tenderness of black women. Significantly, these women were often poor and working class. There was not the level of competition between them that characterized middle and upper class black women. I was raised in a two-parent household with 5 sisters and 1 brother, and my mother consciously talked with her girls about the ways competition and envy divided and separated. She let us know in no uncertain terms that there would be no cat fights, no wars over boys, that we would respect and love one another as sisters. Her powerful lessons in sisterhood have stayed with us. We know how to love one another. We know how to open our hearts. Black women make a mistake when we assume that closing ourselves off and wearing the mask of indifference makes us strong or keeps us well. Repressing our feelings leads to stress, and that leads to a variety of illnesses. Allowing ourselves to feel only rage is equally debilitating. To love ourselves rightly, to love others, we have to claim all our emotions. Following in the path of Sojourner Truth and other wise black women elders, black females must constantly assert our full humanity to counter the impact of dehumanizing forces. Expressing our full range of emotions is healing to the spirit and engages us in the practice of self-acceptance, which is so essential to self-love. Underneath the stern expression, I saw my mother and many of her friends where was an ongoing fear that if they let their guards down, even for a minute, they would be disrespected, hurt, or violated in some way. To love, we have to let fear go and live faith-based lives. Living in faith means that we recognize, as our wise black female ancestors did, that we do have the power to decolonize our minds, invent ourselves, and dwell in the spirit of love that is our true destiny. I just read to you chapter 6 of Salvation, Black People in Love by Bell Hooks. The name of this chapter is Mama Love. And thank you so much for listening. This was a live reading where I typically just go straight through the text. However, if there is anyone who would like to chime in as we close to share their thoughts, I definitely open it up to anyone who's in attendance that wants to hop on and speak. I offer you this platform to share your reflections of what you thought of the reading, or just what's on your mind right now. So just send me an invite, just in these next few minutes, or I can read what you say in the comments out loud. This will be a part of the live recording. Reiki Master Allison says, "This is why I do the work that I do, to help black women heal and love themselves and each other. That's peace." Your Jim says, "Thank you." Cassie says, "Yup. Men want us to submit, but if we let our guard down, we are subjected to power dynamics. That's facts." So real. Thank you for reading. How often do you go live? I try to do this every morning. There are some mornings that I miss based on life circumstances, but I try to do this every morning between I normally get on between like 6 and 7 to start out. This time I'm up a little bit later, but I also do post these on my YouTube. So you'll find previous readings on my YouTube channel. So if you missed this or you're coming in late, you can definitely listen. I'll trying to finish this book up this week. And then with lives I do in the afternoon are typically discussions, as well as I do posts periodically about these topics. Miles says, "Jesus didn't save 4 little girls in church." Ouch, man. Spirit of love is higher evolution. That's facts. Reiki Master Allison says, "Thank you for reading this book." Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. This is what I'm trying to do going forward. Is to get into different texts, and this is my first selection. So appreciate you as well. All right. So if anyone doesn't want to share reflections, what are my thoughts? Um, this is a powerful reading. I know this chapter mainly focuses on black women. Bell Hooks does a great job of bringing in in men, not just black men, but men in general, into a feminist conversation and trying to help men to deconstruct the way masculinity has been distorted in patriarchy. I think she does a great job of that in this book, talking about black love. But this book was about women, and as someone who who's married, who has daughters, who has a mother and a sister, it is a tearjerker. You know what I mean, to know that that I participated. You know what I mean, that I contributed to the things that she talks about in this book. And it can be frustrating as a man when you think about, different, men that mentored you into manhood and different people you modeled yourself after, how both, it propelled you in some ways in life, and then also, but at the detriment of the women you care for. And so, um, it, you know, I, I, I I want to encourage and promote Black sisterhood, and promote uh, unity among Black women. I know, and because I know that part of that disunity is perpetuated by the way Black men treat Black women. You know what I mean? It's a divide and conquer system. You know what I mean? That's what white supremacy is. That's what patriarchy is. It is a divide and conquer system. That's what capitalism is. And so it sets different groups of people against each other. Um, Miles says, teach history first, not a silly religion. Facts. I think that um, we are, the history of Black people is that we are a spiritual people, regardless of what religious context you place that in. That's not to say anything about our atheist Black brothers and sisters. It's just to say that, you know, we didn't get spirituality from this oppression. We had spirituality before this. It's just been twisted and distorted through religion that's been used as a tool to really indoctrinate us in our own self-hatred. So I agree. We do need to teach history. I personally, even though I may not be a Christian, I'm not going to be the person that just says, throw it all out in the trash. Because I realize that even as I speak, there are millions of Black people that practice Christianity or Islam or all of those things. I love them as well. If they come out of that, great. You know what I mean? If they come out of that with a greater understanding, a greater consciousness, a greater sense of self, great. But if they choose to stay there and practice, I want them to still have that that unity, that self consciousness, that self love, all of those things within that religion. So we have to do both. We have to speak inside and outside of religious context because that's where our people are. Frankly. Um, Your Jim says, let's change the negative narrative we see every day. Thank you for assisting us in healing. If it's assisted in any way, thank you. You know what I mean? That's a privilege. Um, our King Sauber says, I heard a content creator today mention that we seem currently obsessed with romantic love. Um, there's nothing wrong with romantic love. In fact, I don't know if we are obsessed with romantic love. To be honest with you, romantic, at least in the classic sense of what we think about in romance, it's a great care for the other person, a great respect. Even though it can be draped in kind of chivalry and some of those patriarchal notions, I think the romantic part of a relationship is the wooing of another person. It's attaching yourself to their personality, what you love about them, before you attach themselves to their physicality. So I'm not sure if we're obsessed with romantic love in that way. Cassie says, "Yep. If Black men say you're not woman enough, women subscribe to it." Ooh, that burns. Our King Sarver says, because from community. Miles says all religion was stolen from ancient Kush. I mean that. Yeah, I mean you can see where a lot of even if you watch Catholicism and some of the pageantry and the symbolism that they have, it comes straight from Egyptian. So Egypt, I agree. Um, Zaskar, man. My own brother and I had a 2-hour conversation about how he is too good to date a black woman. Um, that is a man. That's gonna require a series because that's terrible. It's a terrible way to think, and it's born out of self hatred. In my opinion, I feel like it's born out of self hatred. If you feel like you're too good to date a black woman and you came from a black woman, I don't see how that isn't stemmed in some type of self hate. If you're going to generalize like that, you know what I mean? You could talk about characteristics and things of that nature, but if you just say, "Oh, I'm too good to date black women," and it's just that huge generality, I can't see how that's not born in self hate, or in trauma. Maybe it's born in trauma as well, but you projected that trauma onto all black women, and what I mean, that's, I know black men come back and say, "Oh, the same thing," but we have to understand the power dynamic that we're dealing with, and I think those conversations are devoid of that. Cassie says, and if black men say we're not, okay, I read that already. Okay, uh, okay, okay, all right. Well, I want to thank you all for listening. I don't want to go on too long because this was a live reading. So I'll be back on later on. We can continue this discussion. But until then, I hope this finds you well. I hope this finds you healthy and in good, sound mind and body. Give thanks and be safe.